I really love this quote and really think about what it means to you when we sum up and sum total about relationships, what healthy relationships are. Healthy relationships welcome your authenticity. They never ask you to betray yourself in order to maintain the connection. They ask you to bring more of yourself forward so that they can know you more deeply. And that's in every relationship. So think about that, what that means for you and your life and all the relationships that you have. Life is so incredibly busy. And so I think it's important to be super intentional about the time we spend in relationships. Life can be overwhelming and you only have a limited amount of time. I found this survey super interesting, and just to give them credit where credit's due, the visuals from Sahil Bloom, and it's a snapshot of the survey of the source that American Time, how Americans use their time survey. And what I found super interesting about this is the ages. As you age, the alone time goes up, right? And so you can see for the graph yourself how the average American US person spends their time depending on categories. So it's less important to look at it, super specifically, but it's more important to think about, hey, my time pie is finite. How do I want to spend my time? How many hours of my time pie should go to relationships? And given that, I want to prioritize who I'm spending that time with. So be super thoughtful. Really think about that. How much time do I want to spend, and be intentional about it, in engaging in relationships? And given that valuable commodity, who should occupy that time? Really think about that for yourself. Just like we talked about in the last slide, we're talking about being intentional about your time. There's tons of types of relationships out there. And so just to frame a little bit for this week, it starts with family, we have romantic relationships, we have friendships, we have social relationships, we have casual relationships, we have professional and affiliations and community and pro bono. All of these are entering into your life that occupy that piece of pie that's your time that you're spending on relationships. So really be thoughtful about that. The following are some important foundational keys to any relationship. So think about your relationships and assess whether they're lacking any of these keys. And by the way, feel free to add your own. Do they have boundaries and respect in every area? Do you have trust and transparency, empathy and compassion, shared values and goals? Is it quality time, or do you dread it? In any relationship that you're having, is there conflict resolution? Is there appreciation and gratitude? Is it reciprocal? Does it lend itself towards growth and support for you? Is it flexible and adaptable? Right? The important part about this is making sure that all the relationships are aligned with what you need and what you value. As you look across all your relationships, it's really important to think about, how do I reflect on each category, if you will, of my relationships to ensure they're healthy. So let's give you some methodologies to do that. So we're going to assess reviewing your toxicity and boundary action plan. I want to refer you to weeks 1 and 2 of this quest in order to do that. We're going to add on top of that and layer on some ways to think about your romantic relationships, family dynamics, friendships, social community and affiliations. So let's get started. I really loved this slide on romantic relationships. This came from Reddit, and I've noted the source if you want to take a look at it. But as we're looking at how do you really assess your romantic relationships, make it super simple. I thought these were great questions to really ask yourself authentically and rawly. ask yourself these 5 questions. So take your time to do that. If someone told you you're a lot like your partner, would this be a compliment to you? Are you truly fulfilled or just less lonely? Are you able to be unapologetically yourself, or do you feel the need to show up differently to please your partner? Are you in love with who your partner is right now as a whole? Are you only in love with their potential or the idea of them? Would you want your future or imagined child, or your child, to date someone like your partner? Really reflect on these. It just cuts to the chase of any romantic relationship. And again, I refer you, this was, you'll see the Reddit thread for the posting of these questions, but really reflect on it. The next slide was pulled out of one of the other quests, but it's really relevant for our romantic relationship assessment. If you find yourself reflecting on how you show up in relationships has some root causes that we're going to talk about in the next slide that need some work, don't hesitate to go back and look at the earlier quests available in the Limitless community. So let's talk about Michelle. On the surface, Michelle had 15-year history of unsuccessful love relationships. Had some long-term relationships, had some short-term relationships, but ultimately single. They were dream situations at first, and then in the end, it ended up with non-commitment. And she's someone, again, you want to be authentically true to yourself. If you don't want commitments, fantastic. Michelle was someone who wanted a commitment with a loving partner for the rest of her life. When she really dug into her mud, she took a hard look at herself and realized she ended up giving more than they did in their relationships. Now, on the surface, when Michelle first looks at this, she could have blamed them. But the reality is, just like we talked about, what are the lessons? What are you learning? You can't control anyone but you. And so let's look at that pattern. The thing that those relationships had in common was her. So once she analyzed it, she realized and took full accountability for her role in all the relationships. That's all she can do, is take accountability for herself. She realized that she was giving so much because she hadn't set any standards for how they should treat her. That was the mud. And being vulnerable with herself, she realized that they were treating her exactly as how she inferred that she expected to be treated, as she was giver. She was the giver. She overgave. That was the lesson. Now again, we could stop there as we're analyzing this. But why did she overgive? Let's get to the root cause of this. So when she delved deeper, she realized she didn't love herself and was willing to settle as she wasn't as confident as she should be. Again, mud. Digging down another layer, as she analyzed why that was that she didn't love herself, she realized there was a subconscious iceberg that was a reflection of childhood abuse. Now we're getting to the root cause. But as she's reflecting on these exercises in this self-assessment, it takes a deep dive, because you could have stopped at looking at the mud in relationships. But the reality is, as you start to track patterns and commonalities, and you're vulnerable enough with yourself to look at that, and bold enough and courageous enough to look at the layers of mud, you now get down to the root cause. Well, there's some work to do on confidence and relationships and loving herself and overgiving, all of those are themes, no doubt, that need to be worked on throughout this process. But until the root cause is dealt with, those are all, should we say, branches of the tree, not the tree trunk. I know, too many analogies, right? So that's what you really need to think about as you go through your personal reflections, and why it's so important not to rush this, because you want to get to the root causes of this. Now that we've conducted the root cause analysis and looking at your layers and your mud and how you show up in the relationship, it's important to go back to that toxicity assessment we had in week 1. But what we're doing now is adding the romantic partners and engagements into the mix. I would really recommend that you take your time over this next week to really think through this assessment. Don't rush it. Really reflect on each topic. And I'd also encourage you to be rawly and honestly truthful with yourself. So reflect on the communication patterns. Really think about the health of your communication patterns in your romantic relationships. Is there active listening? Is open dialogue encouraged on all sides? Is the conversation dominated by one person, or is there an equality in the communication? Are any feelings dismissed or suppressed? Is there any existing power struggle, manipulation, or methods of controlling behaviors going on in any of the relationship interactions from any side? Are all parties involved respectful of actions and autonomous choice? Is there any inferred or blatant manipulation or dictating? And then think about boundaries. Does everyone know the boundaries? Are they always respected and honored? Are they aligned with what all parties wish for in the relationship? Do any of them lead to discomfort or resentment, and why? Think about conflicts in the relationship. How are those conflicts and disagreements handled? Are they addressed and solved in a healthy manner? And when you do approach it, is the approach empathetic, and are the solutions beneficial to all the parties involved? Does everyone feel safe and loved while resolving them? And do all parties move forward once they're resolved? And then think about feedback. Is the constructive feedback done with love, kindness, empathy, and focusing on mutual growth? Do the conversations focus on us versus finger pointing? Is there any habitual belittling or condescension or criticism? Is there a cycle that needs to be addressed? Really reflect on that. And then continuing in on the reflection. Is everyone involved emotionally available and responsive to the other's needs? Is everyone emotionally present and attuned to the feelings of others and offer support and validation? Is there any withdrawal, dismissing, and disconnection? And is the emotional availability reciprocal? And then look at trustworthiness and honesty. Is the romantic relationship trustworthy, honest, and transparent? Do you hold the same definition of loyalty and fidelity? And do all parties act the same inside and outside of the relationship with actions and words? Is there any underlying issue that's consistently eroding the stability or foundation of trust? Everyone in the relationship should be transparent about those expectations of trustworthiness and honesty. As long as everyone's on the same page, it's your rules in the relationship. But do they work for you? And then look at the patterns of dependency. Evaluate the levels of independence and self-reliance within the relationship. Is there a healthy sense of autonomy and independence for all? Or are there codependent tendencies, seeking validation or identity or security through the relationship? Are all parties coming from a state of choosing or wanting to be in the relationship versus needing to be in the relationship? It's really important to reflect on that. for a healthy relationship. Because at the end of the day, all romantic relationships that are healthy have healthy boundaries, they foster trust, intimacy, and mutual respect. They value authentic communications and conflict mitigation and healthy interdependence. There should be reciprocal knowing. And what I mean by that is, here are some of the important things that everyone involved in the romantic relationship should know the other's perspectives on. They should know the values, the boundaries, the desires, the needs, the expectations from everyone involved in the romantic relationship. While this should serve as a foundation, it's important that you figure out what should be added for your romantic relationships on your terms in the romantic relationships that you're having. It's also important to note that regular check-ins and reassessments of boundaries and standards for the relationship should be set, because as we all know, everyone grows and evolves, and so does the relationship. It evolves over time, and so it's important to put in an opportunity or an avenue to really talk about this, to really understand and have reciprocity as that relationship grows over time, just like the individuals having the relationship do. We just talked about romantic relationships, so let's give you a methodology to think about family relationships from a dynamics and patterns perspective. Frequently within family dynamics, it can be super easy to fall into historical trends with how we act. There's a concept called generational patterns, and while I won't go too much into it, the concept is a common trend that you find when you look at your relationships compared to your parents, compared to your grandparents, and so on. It's really important to dissect what lies underneath and break those generational patterns if they're not serving you in your relationships. So when you look at this slide, reflect on each of these topics that are noted on the chart and think through how these relationships happen in the family, what's working, what's not, and how you'd like to change them. Really evaluate and dissect the impact on how you show up and how the family shows up and how the social fabrics of your family dynamics impact your world. And then reflect on what doesn't serve you and what needs to change. Encourage an ongoing dialogue and support among the family members to cultivate a culture of mutual respect and understanding. And then operationalize some of the strategies that we talked about last week for setting clear and respectful boundaries within your family. Remember, no relationship is more important than your peace, and family is no exception to that. So as you start to think through the framework that we just talked about, with Sahil's notes on it. It's important to really think about the time pie that we were talking about in an earlier slide, as well as how are your friendships. As you think about the branches and the leaves and the roots, according to Sahil, there's nothing wrong with having leaves and branches in your life. When times are good, these people can bring joy to your world. But never make the mistake of thinking they'll be there during the bad. And according to him, the most important questions are, and I think this is true as you think through these analogies, who are your roots? Who are the people that will be there through good and bad? Who are the people that will sit in the mud with you? Find them and cherish them. So as you're assessing these relationships in your life and healthy relationships, and you're deciding on how you're going to operationalize how much time you're spending, it's really important to think about those roots and those leaves and those branches, and really think through, where do you want to spend your time? How do you want to cherish them? What are the healthy ones? What are not so healthy leaves that you need to prune off? Really give yourself the time to be intentional about how you assess your friendships. And then lastly, we come to kind of quick methodologies for assessing your social, community, and affiliations. This is your golf club. This is going out for happy hour. These are your professional organizations or affiliations or pro bono work that you're doing. At the end of the day, you want to look through the lens. We've talked about and hammered home, you're being intentional about your relationships and how you're having healthy relationships. Really think about, in these categories, do they authentically match you, or how you run them, or how you maintain them, or how you engage in them? Do they authentically match you? And what I mean by that is, do they share your core values? Are you giving what you want from a resource and time pie perspective? Do they have healthy communications and interactions where you show up as all of you? Or do you have to hide yourself? And lastly, given time is a hot commodity, right? You only have so much time for your relationships. So at the end of the day, the relationships that fall into the category of social, community, affiliations, do they feed your soul? Do they bring you joy? Do they raise your vibrations? Really think about that.